Welcome back, Forgotten Crimes fans. Today, we're diving deep into one of Melbourne's most brutal and terrifying unsolved cases, the Easy Street murders. This is not just any crime story, it's one that has haunted the city for decades, a gruesome double homicide so shocking, it feels ripped straight from the pages of a horror novel. On the night of January 10, 1977, two women were butchered in their own home on 147 Easy Street in Collingwood. What was left behind? A scene of unimaginable horror, and an infant crying in the next room, untouched, but abandoned next to his mother's bloodied corpse. This was no ordinary murder, it was an act of pure, calculated savagery. And for nearly 50 years, it has remained Melbourne's most enduring cold case. Suzanne Armstrong, 28, was a vibrant young mother to her 16-month-old son, Gregory. Susan Bartlett, 27, was her close friend and housemate, a kind-hearted schoolteacher. The two lived quietly together in the working-class suburb of Collingwood, where neighbors saw them as the picture of normalcy. That illusion was shattered when neighbors, alarmed by the endless cries of Gregory, ventured into the house. What they discovered behind those doors was nothing short of a bloodbath. Suzanne lay dead in her bedroom, stabbed more than 20 times. Susan's lifeless body was sprawled in the hallway, also viciously stabbed. The crime was violent, intimate, and personal, an attack filled with rage. Yet, amidst the carnage, the killer left behind one eerie detail. Gregory, the toddler, had been spared. This haunting detail immediately led investigators to suspect that the murderer had a connection to the women. How could someone who committed such a monstrous act show mercy to a child? It was a chilling clue, but one that would only deepen the mystery as the case unfolded. Melbourne was thrown into a panic. People were terrified. How could such a barbaric crime occur in a relatively peaceful neighborhood? The media descended on Easy Street, turning the case into front-page news. Headlines screamed of the Easy Street Horror and Butcher of Collingwood. Families locked their doors tightly, wondering if a cold-blooded killer was roaming the streets, waiting to strike again. The brutality of the murders was the kind that leaves a permanent scar on a city. Investigators initially had hope. They collected significant amounts of physical evidence, fingerprints, blood samples, and a blood-stained pillowcase. Surely, they believed, this evidence would lead to an arrest. They interviewed dozens of suspects, focusing on people the women knew, former lovers, close acquaintances, anyone who might harbor a grudge. Yet, with each lead, the trail went cold. No one could make sense of the savagery, nor did anyone have a clear motive to kill these two women in such a brutal manner. In the wake of the crime, detectives interviewed everyone from ex-boyfriends to local criminals. At one point, they focused on a man who had been involved with Suzanne, but his alibi held up under scrutiny. Every person who might have had a reason to be angry at Armstrong or Bartlett was either cleared or found to have an airtight alibi. The killer seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a trail of blood and broken lives. The sense of dread that settled over the city lingered for months. Everyone wanted answers, but there were none to be found. The frustration grew, and the public began to lose faith in the investigation. But how could such a gruesome and deliberate crime remain unsolved? It was as if the killer was taunting them, leaving a macabre riddle that no one could solve. As months turned into years, the case grew colder. Detectives who had worked the scene described it as one of the most horrific they had ever encountered. The sheer brutality of the stabbings, the way the killer had seemed almost inhuman in their ferocity. And yet, despite the best efforts of the police, no one was ever charged. The house at 147 Easy Street became infamous, a reminder of a crime that refused to be forgotten. One of the most harrowing aspects of the case is Gregory, Suzanne's 16-month-old son, who was left alone for days, crying beside his mother's body. The child, while too young to comprehend the horror around him, became a symbol of the unspeakable cruelty of the crime. Forensic experts pondered over why the killer would leave the baby unharmed. Did they spare Gregory because he was an innocent child? Or was this another calculated part of the killer's sick game, ensuring the discovery of the bodies? Gregory was raised by relatives, shielded from the trauma of what happened, but the mystery of that night would always hang over him like a dark cloud. As he grew older, he expressed a desire for closure, hoping that one day, the killer who took his mother's life would face justice. For decades, the Easy Street murders remained a haunting cold case. But then, in 2024, something extraordinary happened. In a twist worthy of a crime thriller, Harry Kurumbliss, an Australian national, was arrested in Italy in connection with the murders. The news sent shockwaves through Melbourne. How, after 47 years, had investigators finally found their man? The details remain under wraps, but it is believed that advances in DNA technology played a key role. Police had always suspected that physical evidence would eventually crack the case, and now, after decades of frustration, they might have their answer. Kurumbliss, with ties to both the victims and the Collingwood area at the time, had been on the radar of detectives, but only now could they connect him definitively to the crime. As the world waits for more details to emerge, one thing is clear. The long shadow of the Easy Street murders may finally be lifting. The families of Suzanne Armstrong and Susan Bartlett have endured a lifetime of pain, but with the arrest of Kurumbliss, there is hope that they might finally get the justice they deserve. The house on Easy Street still stands, a silent witness to a crime that has haunted Melbourne for nearly half a century. The case has become a symbol of both the failures and the triumphs of criminal investigation. It's a reminder that justice, though slow, can eventually catch up with even the most elusive killers. But until a conviction is secured, the question remains: what drove someone to commit such a monstrous act? Was it pure rage, revenge, or something darker, more twisted? These are the mysteries that keep us coming back, time and again, to stories like this. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Forgotten Crimes. We love diving into the world of true crime, exploring the stories that grip the world and uncovering the details that make these cases so fascinating. If there's a case you're curious about or if you have any thoughts to share, let us know. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive, and remember, the world of crime is as complex as it is captivating.